Welcome to the audio course on the laws of wealth and the science of attaining riches. This course is pragmatical, not philosophical, a practical instruction, not a treatise upon theories. It is intended for the men and women whose most pressing need is for money, who wish to get rich first and philosophize afterward. It is for those who have, so far, found neither the time, the means, nor the opportunity to go deeply into the study of metaphysics, but who want results and who are willing to take the conclusions of science as a basis for action without going into all the processes by which those conclusions were reached. The purpose, therefore, is not to burden the reader with long arguments, abstract discussions, or unnecessary explanations of principles which may be understood only after years of study. The object is to make the knowledge contained in this course useful in daily life. The reader is not asked to become a philosopher before beginning to act, nor to master every question concerning the nature of the universe before putting the principles into practice. What is required is a willingness to understand the instruction that is given, to accept it as a working method, and to apply it faithfully in the ordinary affairs of life. It is expected that the reader will take the fundamental statements upon faith, that he will prove their truth by acting upon them without fear or hesitation. Every man or woman who does this will certainly get rich, for the science herein applied is an exact science, and failure is impossible. This does not mean that the reader is to accept the teaching as a mere matter of belief and leave it there. Faith, in this connection, is useful only when it becomes action. The principles must be tested in the conduct of life, in the manner of thinking, in the use of opportunity, and in the way one performs the work which is immediately at hand. The person who merely reads and agrees but does not act has not yet made practical use of the instruction. The person who takes the principles and deliberately puts them into operation gives them the only test that is of real value to him, the test of results. You must have, therefore, no hesitation caused by doubts as to whether the method will work for one person as it has worked for another. The instruction is not presented as something to be tried casually for a few days and then abandoned if circumstances do not immediately change. It is a course of action requiring continued application. The reader must learn to think and act in accordance with the principles given, even when present appearances seem to contradict them. The practical man does not require every difficulty to be removed before he begins. He begins with what he has, and by persistent action creates the conditions necessary for further advancement. The information in this course is delivered with considerations to plainness and simplicity of style, so that all might understand. The plan of action laid down herein was deduced from the conclusions of philosophy. It has been thoroughly tested and bears the supreme test of practical experiment. It works. If you wish to reap the fruits of these philosophies in actual practice, listen to this course and follow exactly as it tells you to do. The simplicity of the instruction is intentional, a principle which is useful only to the scholar and which cannot be understood by the ordinary man or woman, has little value as a practical instruction for the multitude. The reader should therefore approach each statement with the desire to understand its practical meaning, rather than to search for difficulties in its expression. The purpose is to make the method clear enough that it can be carried into the circumstances of everyday existence, whether those circumstances are favorable or unfavorable. It is also important that the reader should not confuse simplicity with lack of depth. A simple instruction may rest upon conclusions which have required extensive thought and investigation to establish. The fact that the method can be stated plainly does not make the principles upon which it rests insignificant. On the contrary, the simpler the working principle becomes, the more readily it may be applied, and the more directly its value can be judged by its effects. The plan of action is given because knowledge by itself is not sufficient to produce the desired result. One may understand the theory of wealth and remain poor if he does not translate that understanding into definite conduct. One may know what ought to be done and yet accomplish nothing if he delays action while waiting for perfect conditions. This course is therefore concerned with what the reader must do, how he must do it, and with the mental attitude in which the doing must be carried forward. The conclusions of philosophy have value here only because they have been brought into the field of practical life. The purpose is not to leave the reader contemplating principles from a distance, but to enable him to use them. Every instruction should consequently be regarded as something to be practiced rather than merely remembered. The reader should carry the teaching with him into his work, his dealings with others, his plans for the future, and his use of the opportunities which come to him each day. If you wish to reap the fruits of these philosophies in actual practice, listen to this course and follow exactly as it tells you to do. Do not alter the method merely because some part of it appears unfamiliar, and do not substitute another plan simply because it seems easier at the moment. The value of a practical system can be discovered only when it is applied as a system. Follow the instruction with purpose, persistence, and confidence, and judge it by the results that follow from faithful practice. The reader is not asked to wait for some future time when he shall possess greater knowledge, greater resources, or better circumstances. The work begins with the conditions that exist now. The instruction is intended for use by the person as he is, with the means that are presently available to him. As understanding becomes clearer and action becomes more definite, the results will provide further evidence of the practical value of the method. This, then, is the spirit in which the course should be approached. It is not offered as an intellectual exercise, nor as a subject for endless speculation, but as a practical instruction to be understood and acted upon. Take the conclusions as a basis for action, put them to the test in your own life, and allow practical experience to demonstrate their value. The purpose is results, and the way to results is through intelligent, consistent, and fearless action. Part 1. You have the right to be rich. While some people may believe that poverty is a necessary part of life, logically speaking, it is not possible to live a really complete or successful life unless you are rich. This does not mean that riches alone can make a person happy, wise, or good. Money is not the whole of life, nor is the possession of material things the highest object of existence. But it does mean that material abundance has an important place in the complete life, because the body, the mind, and the soul all require things with which to express themselves. A person may possess great ability, strong character, or noble desires, but if he is continually deprived of the material means through which these qualities can be expressed, his development must necessarily be limited. For any person to rise to your greatest possible height in talent or soul development, you must have plenty of money. You must have many things to use, and you cannot have these things unless you have money to buy them with. Money is not valuable merely because it can be accumulated or displayed. Its real value is in what it enables you to do. It gives you access to food, shelter, education, books, tools, travel, recreation, art, friendship, and countless other things through which life can be experienced and developed. It gives you the opportunity to choose rather than merely accept whatever circumstances happen to place before you. A person who has sufficient money can devote more time to learning, creating, helping others, developing talents, and pursuing the work for which he is naturally fitted. He can provide better opportunities for his children, contribute to his community, assist those who are in need, and give expression to purposes that would otherwise remain only desires. Wealth, rightly understood, is therefore not merely something to possess, it is something to use in the advancement of life. Each man develops in mind, soul, and body by making use of things. So man's right to life means your right to have the free and unrestricted use of all the things which may be necessary to your fullest mental, spiritual, and physical unfoldment or development. Which means you have the Creator-given right to be rich. The right to be rich is not the right to take from another person what belongs to him. It is the right to develop, to create, to exchange, to receive, and to possess those things which contribute to the fullness of life. It is the right to participate freely in the abundance that the world makes possible through intelligence, effort, cooperation, invention, and the proper use of resources. If a person has a natural talent for music, he needs an instrument upon which to practice. If he has a talent for science, he needs books, instruction, equipment, and opportunity for observation. If he has a talent for business, he needs capital and resources with which to act. If he desires to become a great parent, teacher, builder, artist, leader, or servant of humanity, he needs the means by which his purpose can be expressed. The desire for these things should not be treated as something shameful. The desire to have more is often the desire to become more. When rightly directed, it is an impulse toward greater expression, greater usefulness, and greater contribution. The purpose of nature, the earth and its resources, is the advancement and unfoldment of all life, and every man should have all that can contribute to the power, elegance, beauty, and richness of his life. To be content with less is to miss the point of living. Nature is not exhausted by giving. The world contains resources, possibilities, ideas, opportunities, and forms of beauty that may be continually developed into new forms of usefulness. One person discovers a method of doing something more effectively, another builds upon it. One person creates a work of art, another finds inspiration in it. One person gains knowledge, another uses that knowledge to create something that benefits thousands. In this way, the advancement of one life can become the means of advancing many other lives. The fullest expression of wealth is therefore not found in selfish accumulation, but in the continual circulation and intelligent use of what one has received. To be content with less does not mean merely owning fewer possessions. It may also mean accepting less knowledge than you could acquire, less health than you could develop, less freedom than you could experience, less beauty than you could appreciate, less love than you could give, and less usefulness than you are capable of expressing. Life has advanced so far and become so complex that even the most ordinary man or woman requires a great amount of wealth in order to live in a manner that even approaches completeness. Every person naturally wants to become all that he is capable of becoming. You can become what you want to be only by making use of things, and you can have the free use of things only as you become rich enough to buy them. The modern person does not live by bread alone. There are needs of the body, but there are also needs of the intellect, the emotions, the imagination, and the spirit. A person may need a quiet place in which to think, books from which to learn, tools with which to work, transportation with which to reach new places, and leisure in which to rest and reflect. Each of these things requires some material means. Even the ability to give one's time freely is often made possible by financial independence. A person who is struggling merely to survive may have the desire to help others, but be unable to do so because every hour and every resource must be devoted to meeting immediate necessities. Greater wealth can create greater freedom, and greater freedom can create greater opportunity for service. There is nothing wrong in wanting to get rich. The desire for riches is really the desire for a richer, fuller, and more prosperous life, and that desire is praiseworthy. The man who does not desire to live more prosperously is abnormal, and so the man who does not desire to have money enough to buy all he wants is abnormal. The important question is not whether you desire wealth, but what you intend to do with it when it comes. Wealth magnifies whatever is already active within a person. If a person is generous, wealth may give him greater power to be generous. If he is creative, wealth may give him greater means of creation. If he is devoted to his family, wealth may give him greater ability to provide for them. If he desires to serve humanity, wealth may greatly enlarge the field of his service. The desire for riches should therefore be connected with a larger desire for life. You should want money because you want to live fully, to develop fully, and to contribute fully. You should want enough so that no necessary part of your development is continually sacrificed for lack of material means. Each person, meaning you, must learn live for the body, live for the mind, and live for the soul. No one of these is better or holier than the other. All are alike desirable, and no one of the three, body, mind, or soul, can live fully if either of the others is cut short of full life and expression. The complete life is balanced life. The body should not be neglected in the mistaken belief that only spiritual things matter. The mind should not be neglected in the pursuit of physical comfort, and the soul should not be neglected merely because material success has become the immediate object of attention. The body is the instrument through which the mind and soul act in the world. The mind is the means through which a person learns, understands, plans, imagines, and creates. The soul is expressed through love, purpose, compassion, courage, faith, and the desire to give something of value to life. These three are connected, and the fullness of one supports the fullness of the others. To properly take care of the body, you need good food, comfortable clothing, warm shelter, and freedom from excessive toil. Proper rest and recreation are also necessary to man's physical life. The body requires more than mere survival. It needs conditions in which strength can be maintained and renewed. Good food gives the body material with which to build itself. Comfortable clothing protects it from the elements. A warm and secure home provides rest and protection. Recreation restores energy and gives the body opportunity to move, play, and enjoy life. Excessive toil, on the other hand, consumes the very energy that might otherwise be used for growth and accomplishment. A person who must spend every waking moment merely maintaining existence has little opportunity to develop his higher abilities. The aim should not be idleness, but freedom from unnecessary drudgery, so that work may become an expression of ability rather than simply a struggle against deprivation. To properly take care of the mind, you need access to knowledge and time to study material, opportunity for travel and observation, have intellectual companionship, and surround yourself with all you are capable of using and appreciating. The mind grows through contact with ideas. It becomes broader through observation, stronger through study, and more capable through experience. Books introduce you to thoughts that have taken generations to develop. Travel introduces you to people, places, customs, and conditions that cannot be fully understood from a single limited environment. Conversation with intelligent people challenges you to examine your own ideas and discover new possibilities. A person should therefore seek surroundings that stimulate growth rather than continually reinforce limitation. This does not mean that every possession must be expensive or that every experience must be luxurious. It means that the individual should have access to those things that awaken thought, develop judgment, enlarge imagination, and make life more meaningful. To properly take care of the soul, man must have love, and love is denied expression by poverty. Man's highest happiness is found in the bestowal of benefits on those he loves. Love finds its most natural and spontaneous expression in giving. The man who has nothing to give cannot fill his place as a husband or father, as a citizen, or as a man. It is in the use of material things that man finds full life for his body, develops his mind, and unfolds his soul. It is therefore of supreme importance to him that he should be rich. Love desires expression. A parent wants to provide for a child. A husband or wife wants to create comfort and security for the family. A friend wants to give assistance when assistance is needed. A citizen wants to improve the community in which he lives. A person who loves humanity wants to contribute to the advancement and welfare of others. Material things become valuable because they can carry love into action. A meal can express love. A home can express love. Education can express love. A gift can express love. The creation of employment, the support of a worthy cause, the building of a useful institution, or the sharing of knowledge can all become expressions of the same principle. This is why poverty can restrict the soul as well as the body. It is difficult to give freely when everything one possesses is required merely to meet immediate needs. It is difficult to create abundance for others when one has no abundance from which to create. Wealth, when wisely acquired and wisely used, removes many of these limitations and gives love greater freedom of expression. It is perfectly right that you should desire to be rich. If you are a normal man or woman, you cannot help doing so. It is perfectly right that you should give your best attention to the science of getting rich, for it is the noblest and most necessary of all studies. To study the acquisition of wealth is therefore not merely to study how to obtain money. It is to study how to organize thought, action, effort, opportunity, and resources so that life may become more complete. It is to understand the principles by which a person can move from limitation toward greater freedom, and from mere existence toward fuller expression. The study becomes especially important because money touches almost every part of modern life. The way a person thinks about money influences the choices he makes, the opportunities he recognizes, the risks he is willing to take, the work he chooses, and the amount of responsibility he is prepared to assume. If you neglect this study, you are derelict in your duty to yourself, to God, and to humanity. For you can render God and humanity no greater service than to make the most of yourself. That includes you being rich. To make the most of yourself means to develop every faculty you possess and to bring your abilities into the fullest possible expression. It means refusing to regard limitation as the natural end of life when greater possibilities are available. It means seeking health for the body, knowledge for the mind, love for the soul, and the material means necessary to express all three. The purpose of becoming rich, then, is not simply to have more things than other people. It is to have enough freedom, resources, and opportunity to become more completely yourself. The greater your capacity becomes, the greater your capacity to create, to give, to serve, and to experience. Riches should become a means of expansion rather than a substitute for living. Money should serve life, rather than life becoming merely the servant of money. When wealth is understood in this way, the desire to become rich is no longer something to apologize for. It becomes part of the natural desire to live abundantly, to develop completely, and to give the greatest possible expression to the life within you.